Hi everyone, today I'm going to be taking you through some of the fundamental concepts around getting into a handstand. And the key things for that are really just being comfortable being upside down. Throughout our lives we've probably spent very minimal time upside down, and even if you tried kicking up upside down before, it's probably just for a few moments. Maybe you've tried to kick up and then fell over, and that's one of the key issues with trying to learn a handstand is the body isn't very comfortable with doing it. And so we need to try and build an accessible and safe way, especially as adults, to be able to learn this new skill. And so this is what this phase is really about. And I'm going to be breaking this down with two main objectives for this phase. The first one is called a chair-assisted handstand, which we'll do using a chair, as so with the name, and we'll also be working on wall kick-ups. And really these are two fundamental areas which we're going to use to be able to build up the strength through our shoulders, which is one of the key areas really for actually being able to hold a handstand. At the end of the day, the core doesn't matter as much as many people think. It has some influence, but really having that foundational base, just like with your legs as you're standing up, is really key to be able to do a handstand. If you think about when you're standing up and walking around, your core, it doesn't have that much to play into it. Really, it's the same with handstand. Into a 99% extent, is that ultimately it's the legs, or in this case the arms, that are going to be the fundamental thing that needs to be controlled. Beyond that, really your lower body can actually do pretty much whatever it wants once you get good enough at handstands. That's what we're really going to focus on more than anything as you get started in your handstand journey. And the strength aspect is probably one of the key areas that you'll want to build through. There is also mobility, which we'll be covering in a separate video. But around that, it's not just about getting super flexible through the shoulders, it's also about improving the strength through that range of motion. So to explain that a bit more, first it will be lifting the arms above the head. What I can do here, in terms of me pushing myself, is basically my mobility. This is how much strength I've got through it. And being able to hold a handstand and have open shoulders throughout. That's actually my mobility and my strength through that range of motion. If I got someone, I'll demo with myself, but if someone pushed my arm back as far as it goes, that's my strict flexibility. And same with splits. You can have a passive split where you're holding it for a long time. That's essentially your passive flexibility. And then you've got this mobility essentially where your strength through it, which is how much could you hold in an active position where you're controlling it a lot more. We're going to really be working on that, and we'll also be covering aspects of fear of falling, although there's a full video for that. A lot of the things around fear of falling are also due to not being comfortable with being upside down, so we'll be going through that as well. And finally, there will be a little small aspect of technique as well, with how to get up against the wall, and this will be something that we'll cover with concepts that have been in the crow pose video that were in phase 0 that you can also cover. Okay, so we're going to get started, and we're going to start with scapular push-ups. Now, these I think are really foundational moves to be able to get into and understand. I'm going to demo now of how this will work. So, to start with, just start in a tabletop position, and we're going to push through our in our hands into the floor and round our back. And you should feel like all this upper bit of your back is stretching. You almost want to feel like you're doing a cat pose, except you're still looking between your hands instead of looking down at the navel as you would with a cat pose. Now we're going to lower down. Now instead of bending the arms as we normally would with a push-up, we're going to sink our chest towards the floor. We're not going to sink our belly towards the floor, it's just the chest. So I'm trying to keep the back in the same position, it's just lowering it down. As you start this, I have found as I've been teaching people, it does sometimes take a bit of getting used to of this feeling on what is actually right. So essentially I think I'm pushing into the ground as much as I can, I'm twisting my biceps forward, I'm really trying to engage, I release. I push through, engage, release. To start with, work through these two positions, and over time you'll be able to gain more understanding of the movement and how you're able to apply it as you use it more and more times. Sometimes you don't necessarily feel like you're getting all the movement, but if you're trying to actually engage through those muscles, it will over time come to you activate. So I want you to work towards 10 of these reps as a warm-up exercise. And as you find these easier and easier, you'll be able to extend full plank pose and then go onto the backs of the feet. The backs of the feet one I find especially challenging. You ultimately, if you hold it there and ensure that you've got a flat line, this is really going to be working through your core muscles as well and engaging and maintaining that full straight line, which is going to help you in the future towards your actual handstand itself later on. Now with this we can progress it into many different ways. I would say overall you can build more than 10 reps easily. I do a lot of these in my first warm-ups for my practice myself, build even up to 30 as you get more and more comfortable with it over the future steps of the programs. Now as we go further forward, next aspect is going to be chaturanga push-ups. Chaturanga push-ups are different to the regular push-up. So if I demo a regular push-up, you're essentially doing this. You're bringing your elbows out wide, and this is there to really work on the chest more than anything else. Whereas with what we're trying to do with handstand, a lot of it is on the front here of the shoulders. So we need to work on a different aspect. So to do this, instead, we're going to be focusing on having our hands to get facing forward. We're going to twist our biceps forward, shift forward, over the shoulders, and push back up. So I'll demo on the other side. Put the camera, and we're going to lean forward over the hands, bend through the elbows, keeping the elbows tucked in, push back up. Bend the elbows, push back up. Now the more you lean forward, the harder these are ultimately going to be. So you may want to start doing these a little bit further back. But one of the things that you may find that you end up doing, and this happened to me for a long time, is that you would lean forward as you came back up, and then you would almost like shift back and cheat yourself out of a rep. It may be that if you're finding that you're still doing that, instead you can potentially come down, push back up without using all the strength, and work on lowering yourself down in this position as slowly and controlled as you can, and coming back up yourself using your knees without actually using all the strength. Now I would suggest again with this is you really want to build towards 10 reps of whatever is the key area that you're actually trying to build strength in. At this point we're not trying to build maximal strength. For later programs we'll be working on this. This is just trying to build some capacity so that you're more comfortable with that when it comes to the actual handstand. The next section is going to be on plank pose. We slightly covered it with the scapular push-ups, but I'm just going to break it down in a little bit more detail and the reasons why we're going to be focusing on this. And this is a real foundational movement that you can include in the program, which is going to aid you with the handstand. Now, many of you have probably done plank pose before, I'm sure. The only problem is, and I did this for years before I actually filmed myself and realised I was doing it basically wrong, is that your hips can be either too high like so, or too low, and you say, yeah, I can hold this for 2 minutes, Elliot. I'm super strong. And I thought I was as well for ages, but in reality, you really want to make sure that you film yourself, that you're twisting the biceps forward, putting the hands in, engaging through the glutes, so it's maintaining that straight line throughout. This all of a sudden, I finds so much harder than when I was up like this and cheating myself of what I was actually doing. Throughout this, you also want to be making sure that you're engaging at the top of this shoulder position. So when we did these scapular push-ups at the start of the reps, you may notice that at the top, you're really pushing through the shoulders. This is the kind of activation that I want you to feel like you're having when you're actually doing your handstand, but then also the plank pose. So this is going to, again, make it a bit harder for you. However, if you want to make this, like, regress it down, you can always put one knee down, or even both knees down at the start, and just gain that activation and awareness of how it feels to be in the position. Take one knee out, then the other, even bring one down and switch between. So in the program, I'll write down in the program the different kind of modifications you can do in order to best suit you. I want ultimately you to be able to build towards a minimum of 30 seconds within the plank pose in the correct position. And this will be a progressive thing as you build towards more and more difficult plank poses. And throughout future elements of this program, it's going to become harder and harder variations ultimately that you can do. But this is one of the key foundations that's going to really help you as you move on throughout this handstand course. Now, we get actually into becoming upside down. Built some straight arm scapular strength. We also really worked through bent arm strength a little bit with the chaturanga push-ups. Now we're going to actually use the chair to show us how to get upside down in a more safe, progressive way. So to do this, simply put your feet on any kind of chair or box or anything you've got, maybe even a bed, and get into plank pose and get comfortable around here for starters. Now walk your hands back. To start with, you may struggle to walk super far back. And I want you to start with just finding an area where you're comfortable, or you're thinking, nah, Elliot, I don't want to go any further than this. Just stay here and walk back into plank pose and move between these two positions. Now this is in the program, so if this is where you're at, that's fantastic. Work on this, work on building through the strength here. You may notice that you find that your shoulders can sag as you're doing the pose, so instead work on engaging through the shoulders, pushing through as you're in this position. Again, shoulders can sag. You really want to try and push as much out through the shoulders as you possibly can. The next thing that people can do is that they can look back behind them. Now, is this wrong? No. Technically, it's not particularly wrong. It's really working on something different. So if I'm pushing my head back and trying to push my chest towards the back, so the chair behind me, that's essentially going to be opening through my shoulders. If you're doing it with the intention of opening through your shoulders, that's great. If you're trying to learn to handstand, it's not going to really help you. And the reason for that is essentially that if I kick up into a handstand now, I'm looking down at the floor. When you learn to first handstand, you'll be looking down at the floor. When you get better at handstand, you can then eventually learn to look up at the sky. That's essentially the way you're doing it. The reason why you're looking down at the floor is such that you can see your hands and you can understand how you're bouncing and your brain can better process this. If you're teaching yourself how to be upside down by looking back, you're not really training your body of how it actually feels to hold a handstand. And ultimately this is what we're really aiming to do, is to make it a lot more comfortable for you to be able to get into a handstand. So that's the reason for that. Now we're going to keep on doing this chair assisted, or sometimes I call it L-shaped handstand variation. We're going to get back up and we're going to walk our hands all the way in as far as we can till the point where our shoulders are stacked directly over the hands and our hips are stacked directly over the shoulders. This should form like one nice line between it. We're going to look between our thumbs instead just behind the hands. I find that naturally you almost want to look between, like behind the hands rather than looking between the thumbs. Again, the reason why we want to focus on this between the thumbs, that's ultimately the area you're going to be looking in when you're in a full handstand. Now, the benefits of doing it like this rather than going against the wall for now is that it really does simulate the position of the handstand, but it also is easier and safer for you to be able to do so, of getting in and out of it. So I find it's one of the most fundamental exercises that anyone who I see who wants to learn how to handstand, I will show them this exercise as being something they can use. Now, this doesn't have to be about hamstring range of motion. You might have seen there, I was sometimes bending my legs, or I brought my feet a little bit wider. Don't worry if you have to do that, it doesn't have to be super straight legs. And also, having a higher box as well can be easier, such that it means that you're not having to bend the angle between your feet and where your body is isn't quite as significant. So that is another thing to be able to be considering as you're doing this pose. With this pose, and this is part of the objective of the program, is that I want you to be able to get to 30 seconds of this actual exercise where you're holding it down. And this is going to simulate the full handstand and allow you to be able to progress to the next stage. If you're working towards now even the walks between plank and the L-shaped handstand, and then we can go on to the next section of this video where we're going to be covering wall kick-ups and how to do them and how to be able to get the most out of them. I'll see you there.